Welcome everybody, HSFI community. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Michael Gericke. He is going to be part of our HSFI virtual career day, and he's very happy to join us, who has a history in graphic design and is a friend of the high school and people on our advisory board. So I just wanted to welcome you, Michael, to our virtual career day.
Thank you. Thanks, Daryl. It's nice to be included. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, so we really appreciate this because obviously in the sort of virtual world that we live in, we have this annual career day.
Mm-hmm.
We like to have speakers come in and just sort of share their journey with our students so that they could sort of like image for themselves, you know, what their sort of future holds. And obviously it's even more important these days in terms of trying to get inspired to sort of navigate this new world. And it's very exciting for us with your history in graphic design because we usually, as the high school fashion industries, most of the speakers that we get are like fashion oriented.
Yeah, right.
Fashion designers and stylists or, you know, sort of in that realm. But we do have a very vibrant graphics and illustration community. We have a major. So we have one of four majors. We have fashion design, which is our major one, but then we also have graphics and illustration, visual merchandising. We actually have like department store windows in the front of our school that our
cool.
Students design. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then we have a business program. So you know, and sort of our advisory board, which, you know, how you got connected to us, we're more represented in the fashion industry. So to get somebody that has like this, you know, again, wonderful career in graphic design is just a treat for us. So we really, that's really just wonderful. And so if you want to just maybe, you know, usually you have the person sort of like give the introduction, but if you could give a little background for the students about, you know, what you do and your career.
Yeah, sure. And just interrupt me along the way. Yeah.
Sure, I will.
Yeah.
This whole Oprah thing for me is a little new also, so just, you know, bear with me.
You did a pretty good job. I think you should take this to a broader audience. But yeah, I'm a graphic designer. I am a partner in a firm called Pentagram, and we have a large office in New York of about 120 people or so. But we also have an office in London, one in Berlin, and also one in Austin, Texas. And we do a pretty broad range of different things, which include like brand identity work, where we develop kind of logos and symbols and kind of image programs for companies that include things like Citibank, Tiffany's, United Airlines, what else? The Big Ten Conference, kind of brands and places and products you kind of know. But we also kind of work in design, but in a broader kind of context that we kind of call multidisciplinary. So it's kind of like what we try to do is kind of shape the perception or the look of kind of like a company, a product, or a service. And sometimes that will be kind of like as simple as a logo. It might be a website, but it also could include the design of a physical design of a product. Or we often work with architects and even urban planners on like, what does it feel like when you go to a place? Like in New York, Hudson Yards is the newest kind of real estate development. Yeah. We did the identity for Hudson Yards, like the logo for it, but we also did all of the graphics that you see that help guide you around the place, as well as tell you what it is and where you are. It might include exhibits, magazines. So it's kind of using visual ideas to communicate things and convey a sense of what something is.
So I guess that visual piece, you know, is to sort of express yourself and express like an organization's values.
Yeah.
You know, and sort of you know, sort of focus is really, I think, the core of our school. You know, whether it's, you know, designing a fashion or designing a window or even, you know, our like I was telling you before we started taping, you know, our photography exhibit,
Yes.
you know, sort of like trying to express oneself in a visual way.
Yeah.
And you brought up Hudson Yards, and so I go into Penn Station every day, and I sort of walk to 24th Street where the school is. So I've actually seen, like, over the years, like, Hudson Yards develop. That must have been an amazing project.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of like amazing because we kind of we've related companies who owns Hudson Yards developed it. We've worked with them on several other projects, and this we kind of began in the early stages when they were just kind of conceiving the idea of it, and then help them with like things about the names, like what do you call the buildings, how do you identify them, how do you then kind of promote it to get people to rent space there, and then work carefully with the architects to kind of then, tell people where they are and how to get around it. Even Thomas Heatherwick's kind of crazy vessel, that
Yeah.
copper thing, we worked with him in kind of like, we did the logo for it, but also kind of as you're kind of going up the vessel, there's different things that tell you where you are. And so we kind of developed that piece of it as well. Another interesting thing is that you mentioned going through Penn Station. There's a new, they're going to build a new extended Penn Station in the old post office building across the street. And if you come up on the Amtrak side, which is below those steps of the post office building, there's a new concourse. It's kind of blue and yellow and stuff that we actually did all of the graphics for that, which the idea was to kind of, as people arrive in New York, make it seem optimistic and inviting and things. And now we're working with a very big kind of team to kind of change over the entire old post office building into this big new kind of train hall. So, so it's kind of interesting.
On a very personal level, like, I really can't wait, because I've been in fashion, and I don't want to date myself too much, but like 20 years.
Yeah.
So I've actually seen, that, when they, started the Moynihan Station.
Yeah,
and,
that's it.
And so I can't wait to see over the years what it actually comes out to be. And I think I know exactly what you're talking about with that concourse.
Yes.
Because I've actually, some of my trains actually come in, and I think I've walked through some of that new place, concourse downstairs.
Right. But I think one of the interesting things also, but like the work that all of your students do, is we work with a lot of different types of clients and businesses and things, and it's kind of like each project is kind of different. And so what I find so interesting about it is, like, you try to, when you're first beginning, you try to learn as much as you can about who they are, what they're trying to do, what's the problem, who are their competitors. And then using the tools of design, after you've listened really carefully, is then try to kind of find that kind of answer. And so for us, like, we don't have really kind of like a house style, general style. Like, for us, the challenge is, like, listen really carefully to what's the assignment, what's the problem, and then how can you do something that's interesting and different and unexpected through design. So it's kind of like, in a way, it's like being a little bit of a psychotherapist, and you're like, what's their problem? How do they feel? How do they want to be? And then you're helping them kind of like then visualize that. So I found it really interesting. And each project, it changes, from client to client to client.
I guess that listening skill comes in handy.
Oh, big time. It's super important.
Yeah. One thing that I mean, not only myself, but I think mostly for our students, is that they're very interested in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of, maybe, talk a little about educational background, and, and just sort of how you got to where you are, and maybe some sort of like struggles along the way, and, sort of the perseverance piece. And I think that's very much interested in, that they're interested in seeing, and I'm interested in hearing.
Oh yeah, sure. So I'm from the Midwest. I grew up in a little farming town in Wisconsin, about like 1,200 people or something, and my dad was the local banker. He ran the tiny little bank. Most of my friends were farmers. And when I was in high school, actually, in that area of the state, there's several kind of like Native American reservations. And my high school art teacher was a Native American, and he was really interested in ceramics, and he was a really gifted potter and stuff. And he kind of took me under his wing. And my dream when I was in high school was to go to college, get my degree in fine arts, and teach ceramics at a university, and throw pots my whole life. And you know, which seemed great. It horrified my dad a little bit, but
not exactly banking, is it?
No. And I think when I was in high school, he managed to get me into taking a couple summer classes at the university in ceramics and sculpture and stuff. So I went to college. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee, and I kind of began that journey, or that kind of path. But one of the required courses in the program was to take an introduction to design class, and which seemed kind of interesting. And the professor who taught it actually had just retired from United Airlines, and he was the design director for United. And so he kind of like, he didn't design the logo back then, the older logo, which looked like a U. They called it like the tulip.
Yeah, I remember that.
But he selected the person who did it. But he kind of guided kind of United's program for like, what do the planes look like on the outside? What do they feel like on the inside? What do the menus look like on the planes and the signs, all that stuff. And so he taught the class, and it seemed interesting, you know, and I kind of liked it. And I remember the thing that was kind of most insightful was that, you know, he'd said, he says, you know, I know you like this kind of ceramic stuff, you know, and fine art and stuff, but he says, with that, you have actually a pretty small audience, unless you're extremely lucky and incredibly talented, you know, like, but it's great because you don't have any, you don't have a client, nobody tells you what to do. And so there's a lot of freedom, but also maybe you could say your audience is somewhat narrow. He says, in my world, in his world, he says, if you do something that's more commercial, like kind of graphic design or that type of stuff, he says, you do have a client, people are trying to solve a problem, there's deadlines and all that kind of stuff. He says, but also like, it has the chance to become have this huge audience that it becomes part of popular culture where it's out in the world. And I think that's one of the things that's so interesting about the branding and identity work is like a logo for like the Big Ten or Citibank or Tiffany's or something, like so many kind of people see it, and it just becomes part of kind of like popular culture. So he said, like, if you kind of like are interested in that, like he says, like design has those kinds of opportunities. And so I took more classes, and I ended up in that, and I ended up changing my major to, back then I think it was called commercial design. And I did an internship at the Milwaukee Journal in their art department. And after that, I think I got a job in a small advertising agency as an intern for a couple summers. But then when I got out of school, the thing I wanted to do, really wanted to do, is I wanted to move to Colorado and ski. And so I got a job in Boulder, Colorado, and ended up joining these two guys who had just left the Charles and Ray Eames office. They were, I don't know if you know who they are, but they were like, Charles Eames was a furniture kind of designer who did a lot of exhibitions, but those kind of mid-century chairs that you see made of bent plywood, they kind of invented that. Very gifted person. And so they came from that office. One guy was a graphic designer. The other one was a product designer. And so they kind of like were into this world of like, you know, doing things in different dimensions, like graphics and as well as, you know, physical things. And so I really kind of liked that. And so I ended up staying there for a number of years. Towards the end of when I was there, I worked on doing the graphics for the World's Fair back when it was in New Orleans in the late 80s. And then I really wanted to kind of, after that, I really wanted to kind of try to explore New York. So where New York, one of the great things about New York, as you know, is like, there's so many people, creative people that come together here, like illustrators, photographers, writers, producers, you know, and to kind of like, we were going to try that.
I'm a native New Yorker.
Yeah.
I was born in Manhattan, spent my whole life in New York, so I
Yeah.
totally know what you get about, just the creativity is just like,
crazy. Yeah.
It's really an amazing place.
Yeah. And so I moved to New York and joined the firm I'm with, Pentagram, which kind of had that approach. Like its partners included graphic designers, product designers, architects even. And I was lucky enough to kind of like, the person I met who hired me was one of the founders of the firm. And so he was interested in kind of growing the office, opening more offices. So it gave me a lot of responsibility to kind of prove myself. And then from that, I kind of, showed that I could actually run a business and get work and things like that. And so then I became a partner after about 6 or 7 years, which now is maybe 30 years ago or so.
Wow.
And I've kind of stayed ever since. But one of the things that's kind of unique about our firm is that it's now we have 24 partners, and we all have kind of our own separate kind of design teams. So in my team, I have about 12 people. And it's kind of almost like I have my own little kind of office within this bigger office, but we often collaborate almost all the time between teams. So it's like I tell clients, like it's having the kind of benefit of working with a small group of people, but also the security that we can work on big projects, and we have like a deep bench. So we can take on big kind of international projects, but also we can do things pro bono for, theater companies or museums or things like that.
Did I see something about some program about getting laptops to?
Oh yeah. We did a thing that was a really great program that we did with the MIT Media Lab, and they have a program called One Laptop Per Child, which was this initiative that the founder of the Media Lab had to develop a laptop that you could make it actually for less than $200 and then distribute it to children in need around the world. And it runs on solar panels, or it has a hand crank.
Cool.
You see people in Africa, working, out in the middle of nowhere kind of with it. But we did the kind of the visual identity, but we also did the underlying software that kind of runs the computer. So, so that was really a fun thing that we're still working on.
So I guess my one sort of follow-up question is that, like, as you sort of moved up, and moved from, Wisconsin to Colorado to New York, what do you think, like, in terms of like some, I guess, employee traits, things that you would, recommend to a student who's just starting out their, career? In terms of trying to sort of, just move ahead and, try to, sort of build steps towards, getting the type of career that they would like?
Well, I think actually probably part of it, well, find something you love, that you're going to love and kind of be curious about for a long time. And then I think ambition, I think it's much more about kind of like the will to do it than it is like how talented you are. Like, I think like, I'm not sure I'm so talented, but I think I'm kind of pretty dedicated, and like I've kind of have a stick with it. And I think that goes a long way. So I think something you're really curious about, something you like, something I really like about design is it gives you a chance to kind of like be creative, but also you learn about all these other things. You learn about like all this range of different people that are making things or creating things, building businesses, and you get to kind of be a part of that and help them along. And so I would say kind of like to be curious and hardworking. And I think for a designer, like I always kind of tell students, like, I think one of the best things you can do is try to experience as many things as you can, because you don't know when you're going to need to tap into, something that kind of like connects it to something else, that you're going to use for a project. And I think kind of starting out, like probably the hardest part is kind of beginning, is like kind of like getting that first job and then building on that is kind of like to, persevere to kind of, it's not easy to get started, but I think kind of make the very best of what you can initially, and then be as open as you can to learning things,
Yeah.
And try to stay connected also to a broader community. I would say kind of like the design associations like the AIGA or other kind of,
Yeah.
other professional groups, connecting to those groups, because that'll let you meet other people in similar situations in their lives, that you'll kind of grow with, but also other people that are in places where, they might have jobs, or they might, connect you to someone else, or even just a place to be inspired to see the work of people you admire, but also kind of people who are emerging with you.
So that last piece, I guess, a lot about like just sort of, networking,
Definitely.
in terms of creating, again, not only for opportunities, but just for learning
Yes,
different things.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I was really, it was nice to hear you say, like, the first thing that you said was to love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because it's a long day when you're doing
Yeah.
something and you don't love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's for me. I love being in a school. I love education, and I don't. I mean, I've had long days, but like most days go really quick
Yeah.
because I'm doing something I really like enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
And I guess like just in terms of any sort of advice about creating, I think you said a lot, like, and I think the networking piece, but in terms of creating that first opportunity, whether it's in graphics or, any other, what would you sort of, I know you got to like, sort of like, sort of hustle to get your first foot in
Mm-hmm.
the door, but was
Mm-hmm.
there anything that you would sort of advise students in terms of like, how, beyond what you sort of said in terms of creating that first opportunity?
Yeah, I would say like things like well, I think internships certainly go a long way, and I think actually kind of how you present your work, like kind of like thinking about like that you're going to have to in design, like kind of show like what interests you and what skills do you have, and so I think kind of thinking carefully about your portfolio or your site that that shows a glimpse of kind of who you are, goes a long way, because I think that's one of the kind of initial things that will differentiate you. And
Yeah.
then after that, then I think when you connect to somebody or have an interview, it's about kind of showing that that you're enthusiastic, but I think also like that you're in a spot where you really want to learn. And I think like we look for people who are who know that like they're a part of a bigger team. And I think just in those early days, as long as you're kind of around it and even do the kind of simplest of things, you'll get exposed to so much and learn so much and see how things are done, that you'll gain a lot from that. So I think kind of being open to doing almost anything,
Yeah.
and you'll get chances then to kind of prove yourself or to show how you could do this or that. But to kind of one of the key things we look for is somebody who is really very much understands that they're a part of a bigger team, and everybody is kind of doing it collectively together.
Yeah. I think that's that's a huge thing about just collaboration. And, like, obviously, you're worried about yourself, but
Yeah.
you need to understand that when, there's team success, that leads to individual success.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I know everybody and, our students more than anybody are, worried about themselves and their future, but, the concept that if they get part of a group, that group success will only just benefit you individually.
Yeah. And it is this kind of, it's a very kind of strange kind of balance, because it is so much about like someone's individual talent, and the kind of the
Yeah.
ego of like, I made this, I did that. That's what kind of drives us all. But at the other side of it too, like it's kind of like together, it's like multiplying the power of what you can do, where, you can do so much more with 2 or 3 than 4 than you could individually. And that's one of the reasons I love working where I do, where I've decided not to work for myself solely, but I actually love to be challenged by my partners and the designers on my team because it just makes me better, and so
Yeah.
kind of understanding that. So I think you have to kind of always keep that balance in mind. Like you have to kind of remember you're trying to create your own unique voice, kind of visual voice, but also it gets stronger by kind of amplifying it through this connection to others.
Yeah, and to a point you made earlier about one of a good characteristic to have is ambition.
Yeah.
But you certainly don't want your ambition to impact the success of a group.
Right.
And
Right.
so I think it's what I always try to speak to my students about is just that you are part of a community, you are part of a team.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like you certainly go for it in terms of your own individual ambition and what you want to accomplish.
Right.
But they go hand in hand. That ambition doesn't mean you're not looking out for the person next to you.
That's right.
Yeah. And I guess just sort of currently with what's going on and with the pandemic and sort of has like in terms of your industry, can you see some like sort of trends happening and sort of like adjustments that you can sort of foresee? I mean, I know it's really early and everything, but just any sort of like current observations about sort of like the world that you're in?
Yeah, like I would say like so much of my days before this like were about like kind of like sitting with people and talking about stuff and looking at it and pointing it, cutting out and all that stuff. And I think that's the hard part that's kind of like that we don't have today. But I think it has shown that you can actually stay very connected to people that aren't necessarily in the same room as you. So I think that maybe will change a little bit more, that we'll kind of be a little bit more flexible about working remotely. But for us, I don't think it will totally go away. I do think it has like kind of like all these kind of scheduled Zoom meetings and WebExes and all that kind of stuff. Like it has kind of given actually the week more structure, I think, in a productive way, where it's funny, like when you're in the same building or room as everybody else, it's a little bit more fluid or relaxed, where now it's like, I look at my calendar, like there's all these slots that are all kind of filled, and I think it that part makes it more productive. But I don't think I think maybe to answer your question, I think maybe it'll be a little bit easier to work remotely sometimes, but I don't see it going away completely. And I think we're very fortunate, like in our at least in our office, like that we're still quite busy. Our work isn't dependent on being at a particular place, and we can have virtual meetings with clients and things and collaborators. So I think we've been actually quite lucky that it hasn't so adversely affected us yet, which has been great.
Yeah. And I again, I want to thank you so much. I just a couple last sort of questions.
Sure, of course, yeah.
I don't want to take up too much of your time, but is there like, do you have like a favorite project that you were involved with? Like, because you've been involved, just reading and listening to you about all the different things from, corporate to sports. I saw that, I'm a very big sports person. So I read up a little about, you're involved with like the World Cup and the Olympics and the Big Ten and, and then all these museums. Obviously there's so much to choose from. Do you have like one project that you just like, just think so fondly about that you want to reflect on?
Well, maybe there's a couple. I think the sports stuff is really interesting to me because it's like, it's such a graphic world, and it's a lot of it's kind of televised, and it's one of those things, back to what my professor had said, you'll see it out there, and so I think that does it. Like the Big Ten, like they're like, we'd found this way, the Big Ten conference is the oldest athletic collegiate conference in America. It started in the 1890s, I think. And they had, I think when we began, they had 12 teams or something in the conference, but then they added 2, but their logo actually had a 13, I think, embedded in the type or something. And so it didn't work. So they wanted to do a new identity. And also they wanted to be very contemporary. rather than, they didn't want to base the perception of who they were on their history, but more about that they were leaning forward. And so we kind of found a way to kind of take a 6-letter word, Big Ten, and change it into 3 letters so you could read the 10 in the IG. And so that kind of like was something we just kind of discovered after looking a lot at a whole bunch of different options. And I think it's such a simple kind of graphic that it holds up really well when you see it on a basketball court, or you see it on a football field, or you see it on somebody's helmet. And so kind of like, you know, seeing that stuff, you know, is really been great. And I think the other sports related things, like for the college football championship, through actually a friend at the Big Ten recommended us, and we actually got to design the logo for it, but they also kind of wanted us to design the trophy. So we designed a trophy that's kind of based on the logo, and that we had to kind of like physically figure out what it looked like, find these craftsmen that made it out of bronze and gold and all that stuff. And you kind of see that kind of hoisted at the end of a game is kind of great. So, but I think the other side of it too, there's those kind of big moments, I think, that are, you know, that you see in televised media and stuff. But I think on the other side of it, you know, doing something for, you know, a small cultural institution or a school where there's no money, but it's just a great cause. And you know that like kind of like a powerful thing by kind of helping shape how they present themselves, which allows them to kind of move forward, is very fulfilling. So I think we try to balance kind of doing big visible projects that pay pretty well with kind of smaller things that are very creative, and they give us the freedom to do great things, but also, you know, it's for a really good cause.
We just redesigned our logo for the school.
Oh, I'll have to take a look.
I have to show it. I have to send it to you.
Yeah.
Because I was telling you, we have all these majors.
Yeah.
You know, it's called the High School of Fashion Industries. So, you know, if you know the school's name, it's you don't really realize we have the graphics program or the business program.
Right.
So we made it. We created a logo. You might be looking it up. Like, it's called Fab. And
great.
The High School of Fashion Industries is Fab, like fabulous, and then it says fashion, art, business.
Oh, perfect. Oh, that sounds great.
So we really like, and I really like actually felt like that was very powerful, because again, one of the biggest problems in the schools was like, oh, this is just, you know, we're at the school, it's all about the fashion majors and everything's geared toward fashion. And so we actually were able to create like a logo that actually, you know, gave respect to the art majors and the business majors.
That sounds great.
And so exactly everything that you said, this whole conversation about like sort of reflecting your values and trying to come up with ways to really express yourself. It was, you know, the whole process was a very big deal. So I really can appreciate everything that you said. So I definitely, at some point, you know, post conversation, love to get your your thoughts on our logo.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And you know, I'm very familiar. Like, again, I'm a very sports person, so I know the Big Ten logo really well.
Oh, thanks.
I love that logo.
Thanks.
I'm a Big East fan. I don't know if you're still partial to the Wisconsin Badgers, or do you?
I don't follow them as much as the Packers, but
okay. Okay. Do you put a cheese? Do you put cheese heads on your? Or have you done that, or you're
no? But I do know people that do that.
Okay. Well, I totally respect the Packer fans.
Thanks.
You're a very interesting breed of person. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Michael, I just can't thank you enough for doing this for us, and I know our students are going to love listening to it, and they're going to learn a lot of lessons, not only for our graduating seniors, you know, who are sort of going off to college and the real world, but also, you know, our 9th, 10th, and 11th graders that, you know, are just starting sort of the process. So